Good morning, everyone. We're starting this week's portion of Emor. The portion of Emor is loaded with commandments. Most importantly, most of the holidays are mentioned in this week's Torah portion. But among the holidays, we read about specific mitzvot, two of which we're going to be dealing with. I'm starting from selections from Likutei Sichos, Emor, the third talk. The Torah, and a short introduction, the Torah tells us this week that the day after Passover, the first day of Passover, a Omer waving must be brought to the altar. What is Omer waving? It is a handful, that's 0.66 of a gallon, that's the measurement. Omer is a name of a measurement, just like a gallon, an ounce, a pint, etc. It has to be of barley. Number one, it has to be barley, and it's brought into the kohen, to the priest, and he waves it in the temple, and by doing so, it will allow for any farmer who grew grains in their field to benefit from it. Until then, the new crops is forbidden for consumption. The Omer means the measurement of barley, will allow them to enjoy the new crops. That's called minchat, the sacrifice or the waving of Omer. Immediately thereafter, the Torah is telling us to count 7 weeks, 7 days. That's why we call it the counting of the Omer, because we're counting from the day that the Omer sacrifice is brought on the altar. It was brought only one time, the first day of Passover. Then at night we start counting. And that's why the second night of Passover we count Omer, 7 weeks. The 50th day is a holiday of Shavuot. God says, now you have to bring from the new crops 2 loaves of bread made out of wheat from the new crops. What's so unique about these 2 loaves? You are not allowed to bring into a wave offering made out of any grain, barley or wheat, on the altar until Shavuot, when the 2 loaves of bread are brought. So again, both of them open up the Chadash, the new crops for consumption. The only difference is the Omer will open it up for a layman. Every person outside the temple, Kohanim, Levim, and Israelim, all are the same. But the 2 loaves that are bought on Shavuot from wheat must be chametz, must be leavened, and they would allow and able any donor to bring menachot, to bring sacrifices made out of flour, to be bought from the new crops. Until then, between Pesach and Shavuot, I can go home and buy flour made out of the new crops, but I cannot donate that to the temple as a wave offering. I have to bring old crops. After Shavuot, when the 2 loaves are brought, then I'm allowed to bring it to the temple. Is that clear? Here is the text in the Torah. I'm reading from Leviticus chapter 10, verses 20, chapter 23, verses 10 to 17. When you come to the land which I'm giving you, and you reap its harvest, you shall bring to the Kohen an Omer. Omer is measurements, an offering from the first of your harvest. He shall wave the Omer offering before God on the day after the rest day, which is after Passover. You shall not eat bread or flour made from dried grain or fresh grain until this very day, until you bring the offering of your God. So that's why in kosher supervision world, when you have any product that's made out of grain or flour, bakeries, etc., granola bars, it will have many supervision companies or whatever, especially in the Holy Land. It says yashan. Yashan means it's from old crops, because today we don't have the Omer way offerings on the temple, and therefore the new harvest is forbidden until the new season arrives. Only when you have a new season of crops, you're allowed to eat the old season, because the old season, the one that was when it was new, cannot be allowed for consumption until the Omer is brought. Therefore, technically, we don't have an Omer offering brought in the temple. Therefore, we wait for the new crops to arrive, then the old crop. So that's why they ask you many times when the people who care would ask, is this Chadash or Yashan? Is this from the new crop or old crops? Because if the flour for them is kosher for consumption, it must be from an old crops. Here is the second commandment the Torah is telling us. You shall count for yourself 7 weeks from the day after Shabbat. Shabbat refers to Passover. From the day you bring the Omer as a wave offering, you shall count until the day after the 7th week, namely the 50th day. So another mitzvah to count 7 weeks, that's why you call it the counting of the Omer. Counting of the Omer, meaning counting from the day the Omer was brought as a sacrifice, as an offering to God that allowed for the crops to be benefited. Now God gives us a third commandment. On that day, you shall bring a new meal offering to God from your dwelling places. You shall bring bread, 2 loaves. They shall be baked as chametz, leaven, as the first offering to God. So an offering to God is still forbidden after the Omer is brought until the 2 loaves of bread that came from new crops, from wheat and chametz, are brought on the altar, and from that day on, you're allowed to. So again, if the kohen a man is bringing from the new crops an offering of flour, the kohen is going to be before Passover. He's asking him, is this from the new crops? He said, yeah. He said, I'm sorry, you cannot take it. After Passover, he's asking him, is this new crops of the previous one? If he says from new one, he says, I'm sorry, I can't take it. If it's after Shavuot and the 2 loaves are brought, now you can bring it to the altar. However, they can tell the person, you can eat it yourself between Pesach and Shavuot. Before Pesach, before the Omer, the first day of Passover, the Omer was not brought on the altar, is forbidden even for an Israelite. Is that clear so far? Bob, are you following? Thus, here is a summary, and I'm going to share with you verbally the Rebbe's point, because I think this is the foundation of everything we're going to talk. Thus, on the day after Pesach, the Jews would bring a barley offering, the Omer. Until the offering was brought, it was forbidden to eat any grain from the new crop. On the 50th day of the counting of the Omer, the holiday of Shavuot, would be celebrated. On that day, 2 loaves of wheat were brought as an offering. This was the first offering of wheat from the new crop, brought to the Beit HaMikdash. Until then, meal offerings from the new crop could not be brought. So to summarize again, as just one part of the what we discussed, on the first day of Passover, the grain or the flour must be made out of barley and must be matzah because it's still Passover. On Shavuot, 7 weeks later, the gift of the offering must be of wheat and must be chametz. The Torah specified it must be chametz. And as was said, for the hediot, for the layman, it is forbidden until the Omer was bought on the first day of Passover. Any new crop is forbidden. Now it's allowed. For the altar, we call it for the altar, for God, it is forbidden until Shavuot. After the 2 loaves were brought, the new crop is allowed. This is the background to our discussion. Is that clear so far? Now let's go. The Rebbe says, there is a where is this? There is a Jewish law that tells us that if someone ate the new crop before the Omer was brought, he committed a sin and it is unacceptable. He has to pay. It's a punish. He's gonna be punished. However, if someone brought a offering of wheat, brand new offering between Pesach and Shavuot, violating the law of the 2 loaves of bread, as we just discussed, it is acceptable b'di'evet, after the fact. In other words, the first restrictions of the Omer is a set restrictions with no leeways. If someone did it, they have to stop and they are punished for that. If someone did bring to the temple, by a mistake they bought it, it's accepted by God and it was good. In other words, the way of the 2 loaves of bread is only as the best way possible, but if someone did it, he fulfilled the mitzvah. Do you understand the difference between the two? Yes, Harry?
Nothing can be brought to the Beis HaMikdash until after Shavuot.
The halacha is that if it was bought after the fact, it's acceptable. That's the problem. Yes. That's the Rebbe's problem.
You can bring the old stuff. You can still bring old stuff.
No. You brought new. You can bring old stuff.
That's what I'm saying. You can still bring old stuff.
Of course. They bring every Shabbat and every day they had many. No, the idea is If you brought the new crop before Passover, it's before Passover, it's not acceptable, period. Has to be burned, taken off. If you bought it after Passover, within the 7 weeks, it was acceptable. Even though you're not supposed to, because the 2 loaves will allow you, and the 2 loaves are going to be bought on Shavuot. Yet, it's acceptable, and the Rebbe wants to understand, why is the distinction? Why, when Omer allows it, until the Omer came, it's clearly forbidden without any leeways. When it comes to the altar, Shavuot, that allows for the altar, it is a iffy. In other words, it's only to begin with, and the best way scenario, but after the fact, it's acceptable.
Is this bird completely, or someone eats it?
They eat it.
Right, so if they eat it between the 7 weeks, you say it will be acceptable. Is that part of the info?
Yeah, but if it was the same thing happened before Passover, it's not acceptable. After
he should be bringing it.
he bought it, it should be consumed by the Kohen and is atoned. Because Nazir brings a wave offering, Yoledet, the Kohen has to bring a wave offering every morning, the high priest, every morning and afternoon. There was a lot of wave offering, a lot of flour was used there, oil and flour. If that flour before Passover is new crop, they have to burn it, get rid of it, and he has to bring it again. If it's after Passover, we say to him, bring it, make sure it's old, not new. He says, oh, it's old. A minute later, his son says, oh, I changed the bags. That's not new, old, that's new.
So this is
They
not
say
like-
to him, it's okay, it's acceptable. The Rebbe said, I don't understand. The Torah brings us a commandment that both of them must be from new crops, right? And you cannot use any before, right? How come before Passover it's not acceptable, but before Shavuot it's acceptable? That's the question the Rebbe is going to ask. And the Rebbe is going to give us 3 answers. We got to get moving. Yes.
Keep going. That's what they ask me.
The Rebbe brings 3 answers. The 2 are from the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, and the third one is from Spas Emes. Spas Emes is a Gerer Rebbe. A Gerer Rebbe, one of the great giants that put commentary to the Torah. Here is a summary of what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says, I need you to pay attention because I want to not repeat it 5 times, only 2 times. The Rebbe says that before the Omer, we have 2. We have Omer and we have 2 loaves, okay? Omer is right after Passover. 2 loaves is for the altar on Shavuot. The Rebbe says before the Omer was brought on the first day, the restriction was for both human consumption and altar consumption. After the Omer was brought, the consumption already weakened. The restriction is already weakened because human consumption is allowed, right? The only restriction is to the altar. Because human restrictions was gone, it would weaken the restrictions for the altar. And therefore, just to begin with, the best way scenario, you don't bring it. But if you did, it's acceptable. That's the first answer. That makes sense? Bob, makes sense? Let's get to the second one.
If the guy on purpose brought the new.
Right. After the fact, it's acceptable. Because the first answer, prior to the Omer, human and altar are forbidden. After the Omer, only altar, not human. Therefore, the altar is the only one. We say to him, the restriction is weakened in a way that it's only to begin with, the best case scenario, but after the fact, it's acceptable. Number 2. This is the Rashba. The Rashba says, human restrictions on the Omer and altar restrictions on Shavuot are 2 separate restrictions. And therefore, they have different requirements. The Omer restrictions is for human consumption. It says in the Torah. The Torah makes it clear, do not eat. Therefore, even after the fact, it's not acceptable. It's punishable, he has to repent. And if he bought it on the altar, there's no question it's not acceptable. However, the one that comes to the altar, it's a different category of restrictions. Why? Here is the Rebbe, the Rashba, introduces a rule that applies to in the Torah. The Torah tells us that any time the Torah gave us a restrictions on the altar, it repeated it more than once. It's a rule. In other words, if the Torah tells us, don't bring an animal with blemish, it must have twice mentioned in the Torah. What happens if it mentioned only once? Then the restrictions is far less, much weaker. So you cannot compare human restrictions to the altar restrictions. Why? Because by the altar restrictions always have to have double warnings. These restrictions appear in this week's Torah portion the only time, a single time. Because it appears single time, and the Torah says, do not bring any of the old crop before the new loaves. Therefore, the restriction is not that severe like by humans, and if someone did it, we accepted. Did you understand that? I'm going to turn to Bob. Did you understand that? So we have two explanations. That's the Rashba. Here is the third one. That's the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes says the way the Torah restrict human Omer and two loaves for the altar is totally different if you read the text. I'm not going to bore you through the text, but you'll find it if you pay attention yourself later. When it comes to the Omer, it says lo tochlu, do not eat from the new crop until the Omer is brought. Therefore, it's an ultimate restriction without any leeway. You're not allowed to. When it comes to the two loaves, it doesn't say don't eat. It says that the two loaves must be the first of the new crop. And therefore, I understand you can't bring to the altar anything prior because it has to be from the new crop. First offering must be the two loaves. Therefore, says the Rebbe, there is no restriction about bringing to the altar new crops before, other than disobeying technically the mitzvah of bringing two loaves that are from new. Because if I brought a week earlier a wave offering from the new, I didn't do a sin. The Torah didn't say don't do it. All I did is I prevent from fulfilling the mitzvah that the two loaves on Shavuot must be brought from the new offering for the first time. They are not from the first time, it's the second time. Therefore, when someone brings from the new crop, he fulfilled the mitzvah. Did you understand that? To me, this is the most beautiful one. Maybe it's hard for you to understand, but soon we'll see why is it so powerful. Bob, did you understand that? For this one, I want to repeat. Omer, the Torah says, lo tochlu, do not consume new crop until the Omer is brought. So there is no leeway. It's clearly restricted. Shavuot, it doesn't say don't bring on the altar early a new crop before. It says that the new loaves must be the first sacrifice from the new season. And therefore, if someone bought earlier, the two loaves are not bought first from the new season. They're bought second or third. So there is no restrictions about someone bringing under than abolishing the mitzvah that will come later. Why is the difference? There is a difference between the two. As says, this is the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, you know what's the difference between the three? We're going to categorize them into the first two and the third. Is if someone did bring from the new crops, let's say the third week, are we allowed now to bring more from the new crops or not? No. According to the third explanation, you are, because the two loaves are not going to be from the first from the new crop, right? Therefore, you're allowed to bring from the new crops. You understand? Okay, let me explain it. According to the third explanation, that it's a technical restriction because the two loaves must be first from the new crop. What if someone broke the law and bought 3 weeks earlier from the new crops? You can't do it anymore, right? Okay. So now you're allowed to bring more from the new crops because you will not violate anymore. According to the first two, there is still restrictions, regardless. It's a weekend restriction, or it's the Torah did not double restricted it, therefore it's restricted only the first to begin with. But the restriction would be on the second, the third, the fourth person as well. According to the third explanation we just studied, the restriction is gone. There is no way, because he's not going to make it any worse. I hope I made myself clear. This is just the introduction to the Rebbe's point. Yes.
Some of this actually makes sense, because after you bring the first Omer sacrifice, then if you can eat from the new crop.
That's the Omer,
Right.
first day of Passover.
Right. So what somebody's going to do is they bring the first Omer sacrifice. They say, okay, I can bring from the new crop. They'll
No,
mix up
sacrifice, they wouldn't allow it.
after the first Omer. They can eat from the new crop.
The Kohen would kill them. The
No.
Kohen would punch him in the nose.
What?
Because the Torah says not from the two loaves must
Now,
be
I'm
the
not talking
first.
about the 2 loaves. I'm talking about personal consumption.
For personal, yeah,
Yeah.
you
So
go
what's
home.
going to happen is the individual is going to say, okay, I brought the Omer offering. Now I can eat from the new and the old. He's going to pick a bag. He's going to mix it all together, and he's not going to care. Then a month later, he's going to realize, oh, I have to bring a sacrifice. Now he's got.
They wouldn't accept it.
Well,
By the way,
but
the Omer
they said they will if he brings
they
it.
will not. Just okay. Let me explain something before I answer your question. The Omer sacrifice is one wave offering of these small measurements for the entire Jewish people. Not every farmer brings it.
Okay. Oh.
It's one on behalf of Jewish
So it's
people.
not an individual offering.
No, just a minute. You have 1 million farmers.
Yeah.
And they each one have 1 million bags. Not million offerings. One on behalf of the entire Jewish people. They were appointed by the representative of all Jewish people to bring that sacrifice. It's a single, like Musaf and Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh. Not every person brings a Musaf. It's called Korbanot Tzibur. It's a public offering.
Okay.
Not every farmer. So they announce at the end of the holiday and that night, don't forget to start counting the Omer as we just studied. You have to count 49, right? It's called counting. And remember, and please know that the Omer offering was brought, the high priest validated that the Omer offering was brought in. Now you can go home, open up the new crops, start selling it, grinding it, baking it, make granola bars, make whatever you want from it. That's it. Now, you say the guy went and mixed the old with the new.
Yeah.
When he comes and he wants to bring a wave offering, for whatever reason, his wife gave birth and he needs to bring it. He was a Metzorah, he was a Nazir, the high priest. The Kohen that's coming is in charge that day turn to him and says, from which season is this? And he says, I don't know. So he says, go home when you know you come back.
He already said that he can bring it. He can bring the old to this. If they bring it after the fact.
After the fact, meaning they will try to do their best.
So
the guy says, don't know, you go home. There's no doubt.
Okay.
But his neighbor came and says, they asked him, where is it from? And he says, from the old crop. Are you sure? He said, I'm sure. How do you know? They will investigate, interrogate him. He says, I bought it from Abu Agila, and he told me that it's from the old one. In addition, I tasted some of them. They tasted old. So they take it. While they do it, after they do it, they discover that Abu Agila lied. He ran out of the old crops, but he knew nobody will buy those who want to bring sacrifices. So he said it's from the old crop, and it's a new crop. So they say it's okay, you fulfill the mitzvah, you don't have to redo it. If the same story happened before Passover, he has to do again, and atone. He will have to pay fine. There is much more. Just a minute. I want to stick to the topic because we are way far. So, is this go?
When a guy he lies. He brings the old and says.
If he lies, we're not talking about liars. These are people who are coming for an atonement. We send them. By the way, Abu Agila is an Arab. You don't trust them because you're not sure that they are telling you the truth. They want to make a buck. But mistakes do happen. I don't understand why you're asking me. How in the Torah, many cases may not ever happen. You need to know the rules. Here that happens. How many times you make mistakes? How many times you have kosher food that you discover it's not kosher? We have a whole issue now in Miami. There is a restaurant that's kosher and the same name in another county. One is in Dade, one is Brown. The same name. And they have a Chabad menorah outside and a treif. They sell ham. And what's the problem? Miami is loaded. Miami is loaded with guests, and there is Uber, and they go on Uber Eats, and they see the name is kosher, and then they look for their location. I heard from rabbis personal testimonies of people who ended up eating there, going there and ordering out, not realizing it's straight. Now there is a major who had to go to the rabbi that supervises the kosher one to make them change the name because it's very deceiving. It's called michshol. Because in Israel, by the way, there are similar situations where you have the same name and Teiman or all kinds. And in one place it's kosher, the other place is glad kosher. One place is kosher, the other place is open on Shabbos. Different cities, within a city, you have that all the time. Walt, there is a Uber in Israel, is called Walt. Walt would have kosher Walt and regular Walt. Walt will have kosher Walt, and they will have also Mehadrin Walt, meaning people are very, very strict. So when you go on the website, you go on the Mehadrin Walt, and they will not put on the website any place that's not kosher Mehadrin. So in Israel, that's how they solve the problem. Here with Uber Eats, it's very easy to make a mistake. We have a place called Grill Time. Grill Time in Tampa. It turned out to treif. And people didn't know because Grill Time is in Miami, is in New York, is in New Jersey, in Baltimore. Grill Time, it's a very famous chain, and they sold it. And the people who purchased that were not Jewish. They needed it for papers to get into for having a job. A month later, the chef happened to me. I knew him, unfortunately. The chef convinced them not to go kosher because the restrictions. This way, it can be open on Shabbos, God forbid, and this way, he can offer different types of food. It went treif. But they refused to change the name, Grill Express. There are some websites today that list. I went on Shalom magazine. There is from Federation that lists a bunch of restaurants are not kosher. One of them is Grill Express. I called the girl that's in charge at the Federation. Says, why don't you verify? She says, I apologize. Next time, the next one we do, I'll verify, and it will be the last thing before we close the magazine. So they are planning to publish it in October. She will be in touch with me right before October to make sure that, another job added to me, but thank God, at least there is a will. I need you to understand, we're not dealing with cheaters and liars, okay? We're dealing with the fact. Those mistakes happen. Kosher le-Pesach turn out non-kosher. Does it happen? Did you know the story happened to me? I'm going to show it to you. One of the first years, there were no kosher caterers for Passover. One day, David Elliott. You heard of David Elliott?
The chicken guy.
In where? In Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Scranton, Pennsylvania. David Elliott was the only supplier of kosher meat, of kosher chicken to poultry, to Chabad. I ordered, this must have been 1994 or 5. My wife was pregnant. She was due soon to have a child, I believe. I'm not going to say the name of the child, but I couldn't make her clean the house because we couldn't afford it, and then cook for public seder. So for the first time, I broke my tradition and looked to buy ready. David Elliott offered pre-braided chicken breast and chickens, drumsticks, etc. So he purchased it, and it was delivered from Miami. There used to be a refrigerator company called Alterman. They would deliver it from Miami, and we got it. The day before Passover, I open it up, take it out from the freezer, roasted. I see it's braided with breadcrumbs. Now, for Chabad, we gebrocht. Gebrocht means even if it's matcha crumbs, it went to liquid. Any liquid we don't want. So it's a big no. And there is a supervision. It was taped with the Crown Heights. The only supervision Chabad was in Crown Heights. I called Rabbi Marlow. Rabbi Marlow was one of the 3 rabbis in Crown Heights. And he says to me, hold on. And he put David Elliott on the phone. And David Elliott said, no, it's not. We don't sell such a thing. He says, what do you mean? I ordered kosher Passover. They told me they're selling it by the case. Here is the case. I have the case in front of me. There was no cameras on phones then. And there was no smartphones either. David Elliott turned to me and says, I'm so sorry. So I turned to the Rabbi Marlow, and I said to him, what should I do? It's called Efsed Merube, a very large loss, big major loss, because now the question is whether it's kosher for Passover to begin with. So he said to me, what do you want me to allow you to use it? I'll never do that. I says, but I need help here. He says, I cannot help you. All I want is for you to bring me the box. The box. I said to him, I'm coming to the Rebbe, Yud Aleph Nisan, the 11th of Nisan, 4 days before Passover, is the birthday of the Rebbe, so I always would travel to the Rebbe. He says to me, make sure you bring that box, even if it costs you, I'll pay. And when I came to look at it, he immediately called David Elliott. And David Elliott, Rabbi Marlow told me that this mistake had caused a lot of people that are not even aware that they are getting non-kosher for Passover. I ended up using it for Pesach, but I did not eat it. Until today, I have remorse about that. But I had no choice. I had about 50 or 60 people. And I'm not sure. Yeah, with supervision of Crown Heights, the only Chabad supervision.
Is somebody fraudulent? What happened?
They don't know the fact that the plant. Gebrocht. But Rabbi Marlow and the supervision, I don't want to get any farther. It will leave you more questions than answers. That's why I'm debating why I did it. But all I'm saying to you is, no, we're not dealing with cheaters. We're dealing with mistakes. Right. So if a mistake happened before Passover, you have to atone, and whatever you did is unacceptable. If you ate challah of Shabbos from the new crop before Passover, from the new crops, you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Shabbat eating 2 loaves. It's considered, it's a forbidden food, like eating non-kosher. But after Passover arrived, during the 7 weeks, we tell you don't do that for the altar. If you bring to the altar, and if you don't know, don't bring it. They're very strict. What happened if it went between the lines and it happened? Once it happens, we tell the person, what you did is acceptable. That's it. So we had 3 answers. Again, the first answer is there are 2, the restrictions is the same. Before Pesach is restricted for men and the altar. After Passover, the restriction for men is lifted. Because the restriction for men is lifted, the restriction for the altar is weakened. It's still restricted, but not as severe as it was before it was forbidden, allowed. The second explanation is there are 2 separate restrictions. And there is, so for men it's restriction, ultimately restriction completely without any leeway. The restriction for the temple is a much different restriction. Why? Because for the altar, any restriction had to have appeared in the Torah more than once, 2 times. That's the rule. This restriction appears only one. Therefore, it's a restriction that they will try to keep. But after the fact, it's accepted. God would say, I keep a blind eye. The third explanation is totally different. The Rebbe says, what's the third explanation, which, as I said, I love the most, is that
What you doing?
the Rebbe says the human restriction before Omer is, it says in Torah, do not consume, lo tochlu. The second one for the altar restriction, the 2 loaves, there is no such mention in the Torah. All that the Torah says is that the 2 loaves must be the first offering from the new crop. Therefore, if you bought from the new crop earlier, you did not fulfill the mitzvah of the 2 loaves. And therefore, the restriction is much weaker because there is no prohibition against bringing it. It's just that it will prevent you from serving God on the holiday of Shavuot in the way God wanted. Why is it important, the third one, says the Rebbe? Because what happened if someone by mistake already bought from the new crop and now we discovered, are we allowed to now bring more? According to the third explanation, you're allowed to. Because there's 2 loaves on Shavuot anyway are already violated. They are not going to be from the new crops because one is already brought. So now you have no restriction. The Torah never says don't do that. But however, before Passover, the Torah says don't consume. So if one brought it on the altar or ate it himself, they must continue keeping this mitzvah afterwards and restrict themselves from it as if they never ate. According to the first 2, there is no difference if one brought by mistake or not. They're always forbidden for the altar. Did I make myself clear? I want to get to the...
Just one question.
Yes.
None of this applies in the diaspora. If Publix goes and gets flour.
You ask if it applies to the diaspora or not. It's a machloket. It's a debate. According to Rambam, there is a restriction, but it's rabbinic.
Mhm.
According to other commentators, there is no such restriction.
Okay, so what if
The
you?
Alter Rebbe, they follow Chadash because every new Meshugas, they want to make sure that they follow like
So
everybody
they're gonna
else.
go to Publix, for example, and they're certifying their college.
They are non-Jewish, so it doesn't apply to them.
Okay,
So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. You go to Publix, and they go and have a kosher OU on the
college,
challahs.
the frozen college.
They must be Yashan. They are not Chadash. They are from an old crops.
Okay, so they actually do check that.
By the way, today, technically in America, in the commercial environment we live, most of the flour that you use today is probably 2 or 3 years old at least. It's not.
I get it. Yeah.
But the restriction is not just flour. As grain, dry, or even as granola bar. I use granola bar or any candy or any energy bar that has grains. It has to be from old. So Chabad Hasidim will try, but will not put an effort and make a big stink out of it outside of Israel.
If it has grains, what kind of bracha?
Barley Priadomo. What's the question?
It has no flour?
The flour is there just to hold it together. The main staple is the grain. So it's Barley Priadomo because it wasn't grounded.
Getting back to the thing about it, if the store has a Tuda Hachshel,
What?
if every store has a Tuda,
Yeah,
can you go with that? Or you have to check what
it depends what type of food and it's what type of food. There are some people that the Rabbanut just discovered that there are major fraudulent activities in the Rabbanut. You know that? That the Rabbanut himself admitted. I mean, this was not a secret for all the years. So there are things that you can, even in the United States or everywhere, there are many organizations that are not trusted. You can trust them.
Using the link to
I would like to go back to our discussion here. Says the Rebbe, even though the 3 reasons vary from one another, there is a rule in Torah, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these are words of a living God, which means the ideas behind the reasons is very powerful when it comes to spirituality and Kabbalah. That's what Kabbalah does. Says the Rebbe, particularly with regards to sacrifices. In the category of sacrifices, our mindset is the most crucial point. The critical part of the sacrifice is our mindset. And that's why that's the only category where if I had an idea, a thought of a sacrifice, that I'm bringing a different sacrifice, even though the action and the words are all done properly, it's disqualified. It's called pigul. So if I had brought a thankful offering, which is supposed to be consumed for 1 night and 1 day, and I or day and night, and I said, oh, probably I'll use it for 2 days, it's not good. The kohen, when you sprinkle in the blood or slaughtering the animal and says, oh, this is a sin offering. It wasn't sin offering, it was a holiday offering or a piecemeal offering. The sacrifice is not qualified, it's disqualified. It's forbidden to put it on the altar. It has to be burnt and taken out. In other words, the thought of my thought, your thought, is affecting the sacrifice more than the action or the speech. Therefore, those ideas, it's a mindset, it's the intellect part of our human, therefore they count very well. Says the Rebbe, let's see what the 3 ideas are. We don't have time to go about all 3, so I'm going to generalize all the 3 together. The Rebbe says there are 2 differences, and I pointed out right from the outset. One is that the Omer on the first day of Passover must be leavened, because Pesach, and must be of barley. The 2 loaves must be chametz. The Torah does not give us a choice. The Torah says chametz te'afena. They should be baked chametz, and they should be of wheat. Says the Rebbe, what the difference between barley and wheat? It's in across the Torah. Barley is a animal feed. Animal fodder is made out of barley. Wheat is human food. Today, many people for health reason would eat barley, but it's considered ma'achal be'ema. Animal eat barley. And wheat is consumed by humans. The other thing is, on the day of Omer, it's the first day after Passover. What happened right after Passover? The evil inclination of the human was in its full force. The animal soul was in full force, running the show. That's why they had to be pulled out of Egypt. And that's why God is giving them 7 weeks to walk on the 7 natural instincts and purify them before God makes a covenant with them. So right now they are at the start of the service. Who is in charge? The animal soul. That's why it's barley. That's why it has to be leavened, flattened. We need to walk with an animal soul and so to say, put her under the yoke of the Torah and Mitzvot. The 2 loaves are brought in from wheat because now we became humans. The godly soul is in charge because after 7 weeks, it's the Torah calls the 7 weeks usfartem lachem, count. Lispor meaning to count. But usfartem is also to purify or to shine. Sapphire, sapphire is a beautiful, probably the most exquisite stone from the 12 stones on the breastplate is sapphire. אבן תפתדה וברקת תור אחד, נופח, ספיר ויהלום. נופח, ספיר ויהלום. Yalom is diamond. Sapphire is sapphire. The word sapphire is from a shiningness. It shines forth. Usparta meaning you purify and shine your character. That's the purpose of 7 weeks times 7. By that time, we reach the holiday of Shavuot and we make a covenant. Now, the sacrifice we eat is made out of wheat because now we are complete. We are a human being. That's why it must be chametz. What's the benefit of chametz? It has a taste. It has yeast. You can mix some. On Passover, the Omer represent tasteless because you're dealing with an animal. And therefore, you have to feed them barley without, you can't add butter on top of the barley. You cannot add jam or peanut butter. It's the animal is not going to eat it. They need pure. But when it talks about becoming a human being, now you want to have the bread with a smear over it. You want to have it with olives, with some types of other tasty food. That's why it has to be chametz. Chametz meaning it should be taste. It should have a taste to it, not just plain bread. And the Rebbe will go and explain the differences of the 3 reasons. Each one is accommodating a different way. But the third one, and I'm not going to go to get there, but the third one, the Rebbe says, the new bread of the Shavuot, according to the third explanation, has to be brand new from the new crop, which means once you reach that point of being a good human being, that you are able to subdue your animal soul, you need to bring a sacrifice that's brand new. What does it mean brand new? Even though outside the temple you can use that. Brand new meaning you do not count the past. You don't look at your past, but you turn the page because now it's start new fresh. And that's the idea of, so there is no restriction, says the Rebbe. According to the third opinion, the Torah never restricted brand new loaves on the altar until Shavuot. The Torah just said that on Shavuot it should be from brand new the first time from the new crops, because the Torah wants to tell us that all the 7 weeks was just an introduction and preparation for the new day of Shavuot, where you turn the page and you start fresh new as a good human being. And I think this would be a great lesson for us from the Torah portion of Omer, counting the Omer, and Shavuot, the offering of the Omer from barley, matzah, and the offering of the 2 loaves of bread made out of wheat, but also from the new crops and the differences between them. Thank you very much.